A couple of weeks ago, Lenster was released into the growing field of decentralized social media apps. Lenster is built on the Lens protocol, which is a set of smart contracts on the Polygon network on the Ethereum blockchain. Lenster has a beautiful UI, much like a Twitter app. You can see the posts of people that you follow. You can go over to explore and see latest posts come up. You have this concept of communities, which is kind of like Facebook groups. You could probably build your own client that looks more like a Reddit or a Discord server kind of based on this. You're able to create your own community. And also it has within it this ability to create a crowdfunding DAO, which is kind of a new thing. As I was exploring Lens, it occurred to me it'd be fun to have access to this data coming through. And lucky for us, the Lens protocol team came up with a GraphQL API that lets us do just that. I can write a GraphQL query over here, and I can get results back. So today I'm going to take you through the process of using GraphQL to get this data out of Lens protocol. And if you're not familiar with GraphQL, that's fine. We'll go over some basics. And if you are familiar with it, I think you'll still get something out of it because, as you know, GraphQL implementations can change from vendor to vendor. And so we'll go through that. And we'll go through queries so we can get posts and profiles and comments. And we'll even try to figure out how we can get into that communities aspect, which I think is really neat. So without any further ado, let's get building. But before we start with our GraphQL queries, let's go ahead and get an idea for the data structure here. We know we're going to have posts and we're going to have comments that go to these posts. I can go over here, we're going to have profile data. So these are all the different types of data that we're going to be getting. Now, we're not going to spend too much time on the implementation details of how this data is saved, but you might have heard everything is an NFT. So your profile is an NFT, your posts are NFTs, your comments are NFTs. Like I said, we're not going to go deep into that. We're going to look at this data structure at a little bit more abstract level, kind of at a class level, if you will, object level. So let's take a look at that. So starting out with the Lens data structure, at the top level, we have your Ethereum/Polygon address, and also known as your wallet. And it can own one or more profiles. Right now, I think you can only have one profile, but in the future, you'll be able to have multiple. And the profile will own posts. So we got a one-to-many relationship between profile and posts, and then posts can have many comments. And we have this other concept of a mirror, which you can think of it as a repost or a retweet, which also is related back to a post. And these three things, the post, comment, and mirror, really they're all the same thing. They're a publication. But the way it works out is a comment is a publication whose parent ID is the original post publication. And the same thing with a mirror. But I'd mentioned before, we have that concept of a community, and that's not within this data structure necessarily. So we'll try to figure out how that's implemented towards the end of this little tutorial. Okay, so I kind of already hinted at the GraphQL query structure. Let's start fresh. Like I said, some of you are new to GraphQL and others have more experience, but we'll start with the basic. We'll do a query, and then we would typically put the object that we are querying for. In this case, we'll have profiles. We'll ask for attributes on the profile records. And in this case, we'll first use items. And then with items, this is where we'll select those attributes where we expect an actual value back, something like ID. So if you're familiar with SQL, we can think at this point we're doing our select list, right? Where we want ID and name, and let's do owned by. That will give us the Ethereum/Polygon address that owns this profile. You'll notice one thing different than SQL. Looks like we're missing commas, but according to the syntax of GraphQL, we don't put commas. We just put carriage return there, and that is our delimiter. Okay, in some implementations of a GraphQL API, this would be enough to just hit run and get back the data. But we can see here we're getting an error. And that's because we need to put what, going back to SQL terms, we need to have some sort of aware clause, right? So if this is our select list, and the way we would do that is we'll go ahead and we'll put open close parens, and in here we'll put a request object and we'll give it a value of profile IDs, and the value we want here, we'll go ahead and get my profile information. So this is my profile ID. I'll go ahead and copy that and paste it in there, and when I hit run, there we go, Kenny Jacobson ID, and this is my Ethereum address. So if you want to send me ETH, go ahead and just write that down. I'll give you a few seconds. All right, let's cover a couple more things real quick. You can give this query a name, and so I'll call this profile query, and we could call it Steve. It doesn't matter. It's just think of it as a variable name that you'll be able to use to reference, and we'll see where that gets useful in a minute. So I'm just going to call this profile query. Okay, the other thing I'll point out is we have this keyword query, which would correspond to select, or if we're thinking CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete, it would correspond to our read. Now, how would you change data, put data in there, delete it? The other part of the CRUD, that is called mutation. And we won't go over that today. We'll go over that in another lesson. So today we are just going to stick with querying. One more thing I should have covered in the beginning is how did we even get here? How did we get to this IDE? Well, I just typed in api.lens.dev, and that's the endpoint for the GraphQL API. If I hit return, that API has built into it this nice little IDE, which I believe comes with Apollo server if you create your GraphQL API with Apollo server. But there's an IDE I like better than this one, so we're going to use that from here on out. So if you go to GraphEQLBin.com, GraphEQLBin.com, and hit return, it'll say enter a GraphQL endpoint to create a bin. So what is it asking for there? Well, that is just this api.lens.dev endpoint. So I'll copy that. I'll paste it in there. You could tell it had to think about it, go make sure that this exists, and when it's sure it exists, it gives me this button to open, and there we go. We have something very similar to this, but I'll show you why I like GraphEQL bin a little bit better. So let's go ahead and recreate our profile query really quickly, but I'll be able to do this with some clicks and configuration instead of writing it by hand. So I'll go to profiles. You can see it already starts to put the information in there. We know that I need something for profiles ID. Let's go ahead and grab this again, and I'll just paste it right there. And then there's my items, and I can get my ID, name, and owned by, and hit run, and see how much faster that was. And now I can see all of these attributes sticking out right in front of my face. So if I want to go through some more and look at these are arbitrary attributes that you can add to it. And so in this case, it also has my Twitter handle and my location. If we go back here, you can see there's my Twitter handle and my location. I can click on bio. We'll get that. We can see programmer, musician, educator, founder. We got that right there. If I want to get that picture, I can go down here to picture. I want media set, and original and URL. And if I hit run, there we go. It's right here. And if I do a go to, there we go. There's my profile picture, my little schnauzer. Now you'll probably also notice that this profile IDs is plural and we're passing it a single variable. So as you can imagine, you can put in multiple values here. So let's go over, we'll look at people I'm following. We'll go down to my friend Paul Burke, bring up his, find his ID. We'll go back here. And what we're going to have to do is put this in an array. So we'll put square brackets there and a comma. And cross our fingers, hit run. There we go. So we have Paul Burke as one record and then Kenny Jacobson as another record. And you'll notice that it named my query just my query, but I can call this something like, I don't know, get profiles, and I'll hit run. And remember how I said this is useful? Now if I go to history, we can see a bunch of other queries that I've ran. And this, where was the one I just did? There we go, get profiles. If I click star, now it'll save it towards the top. And so if I ever want to get back to it, it's right there. I'm going to go ahead and close history. So that was profiles. Let's go ahead now and get some posts. Now, if you remember, there's not really a, oh, I don't even have to type that, do I? There's not a posts data type. What we have are publications. So let me go over here. We'll find publications and I can click on profile ID and put in, I guess this is Paul that I have in cache. And here, I'll just take a look at posts and let's just do ID. Now, if I hit run, I'm going to get an error because we have another item in our, our quote, where clause that we're missing. And that is publication types. So let's go over here, click that, and look, it has a nice little drop down. So we'll leave it defaulted to posts. And now if I hit that, there we go. I've got post ID right there. Let me go ahead and change this back to mine. There we go. So I have a few posts right there, but it just has the ID number. So we want something interesting. We want the actual text of the post, right? So let's go into metadata and do content. So now we can see hot tips and a community loves progressive, and I post this on DeSo blockchain. If I go over here and I look at my post right there, hot tips, launched new community, post this on DeSo blockchain. So there we go. That's how we can get posts. So one thing, I kind of pulled a fast one on you guys. I just clicked on this post and I chose metadata and content. But you might have noticed it does ... on post. Well, what does that mean? What's happening here is because our publications have different types to them. We've got a post and a comment and a mirror. If you want to think of this in object-oriented terms as polymorphism, we have the potential that each one of these types might have different fields. And so what happens here is what we're saying is of the publications that get returned, if they are a post, then go ahead and give me these fields. But if we got information like comments, we could click on that. We get ID, and let's go again to metadata and do content. I can click there. Now, we still only have posts. Why is that? Well, because I filtered by post. Could we filter by post and comment? Well, we see a plural there, so the answer is probably yes. If we go ahead and create an array, and do a comma, and let's do comment. Now if we run it, we get a lot more. So we get my posts and we get some comments. But how can we tell one from another? Well, if we go over here, there's kind of a hidden attribute called type name, and it occurs above the level of post and comment. So now if I hit run, there we go. Now we know which ones are comments and which ones are posts. So that's how you get posts for a given profile. But what about that main stream of everyone's posts coming in? How do we get that? Well, that's another object in here. So let's clear this out and let's go over to Explore. We want Explore Publications. So if you remember, over here under Explore, we have three different values: top commented, top collected, and latest. If I click on latest, we get that. Let's go over here and we'll do latest there also. And we're getting a red squiggly because we haven't selected any items. We need to have at least one item in our select list. Let's do post, and it automatically defaults to doing ID. If I hit run, there we go. I get a bunch of publications coming back. But we could see some of these are empty objects. Can you guess why? That's right, because we're only doing the ... on post. We haven't set up anything for comments or for mirrors. And just like we did before, if we want to take a look at what type it is, we could put the __ type name. We'll run it again. And now we can see that the ones where we don't have an ID, those are comments. And here we have posts with an ID. So if we wanted to do comments also, we could do that. And of course, it's not fun unless you know what information is in the post or the comment. So let's do content and content. And there we go. This is part of that stream of all the different users who've been posting, and these are the latest ones. Now, in addition to just getting the information back on these objects that we've asked for, we know that every post or comment has a profile associated with it. So if we look over here under post, we can see profile. And now, because right now we don't know who the people are, so we could go over here and click handle. And the same if it's a comment, we can look for profile. And we'll put their handle there. Now we'll hit run. And we get the handle for everyone who is either putting a comment or a mirror or a post. And let's see how they line up. So we have how to play, and we have with luxlux.lens. So we go over here, how to play, luxlux.lens. Come over here, we have something from the handle lovechow.lens. We have that right there. Now, sometimes the order will be slightly different because there is a randomizer that's put in here. But right now they're lining up, so that's great. Okay, another aspect that we didn't look at quite yet, let me go ahead and go to my profile. We can look at my posts and my comments and my mirrors, but right here we also have NFTs. And like I had mentioned before, and we won't get too into it, but your profile's an NFT, your comments, your posts, your mirrors, all of that. And so you can see all of these being kept track of there. But it also has my CryptoKitty and my humanoid and my kennyjacobson.eth, my ENS domain. So let's figure out how we get that information. Let's clear this. And right over here, we see NFTs. And what's nice here is we get some asterisks telling us that these are required fields. In the other ones, there were required fields, but they didn't give us an asterisk. But that's fine. We're figuring it out. So first of all, we want the owner address. Now we might be tempted to think, oh, that's this right here, this user ID that we keep using. That's not it. What we're looking for, because this is our profile ID, what we want is one level up. We want that Ethereum address. And if you remember, I said that naming your queries would come in handy. So let's click on history and let's look for my query, my profile. That's the one we did. And if I hit run, Kenny Jacobson, there is that address. So I can copy that. And let's go back to NFTs. Luckily, we didn't build too much with NFTs yet. So there we go. We'll put my owner address right there. And then it says chain IDs. So this is the blockchain that you want to pull the NFTs from. And right now there are two. There's Ethereum and there's Polygon. And Ethereum, the ID is 1. And then let's look at items. And right now, let's just grab chain ID and how about description and ERC type. And I'll hit run. Now we get an error because as helpful as GraphQL bin, however you say it, has been for us, sometimes it gets things a little bit wrong. This chain ID, if we look over here, it's putting it in as a string, and it actually wants it as an integer. There we go. So from the Ethereum chain, I got my CryptoKitty and my humanoid and my ENS name. Now, if I want to pull also from Polygon, the number there is 137. And as you guessed, we're going to have to wrap this in an array. And now when I hit run, I get my Polygon NFTs also. Now, if you're wondering if this owner address, if that accepts an ENS domain like kennyjacobson.eth, the answer is no, it doesn't. So it just has to be that hexadecimal hash. One last thing, so let's go ahead and we'll look for the URL for one of my NFTs, one of my digital art NFTs, that is. So we'll go to content URI, and if we hit run, we get that. We'll do it for my CryptoKitties. So I can copy that, I can go there, and this is going to give me metadata. And within the metadata, we see image URL, and I can go here, and there we go. There's my little CryptoKitty. All right, you ready for another one? Let's go over here. We have a search box right here, but right now, mostly, at least in the Lenster interface, it is for finding profiles. And you can go by either the name or the handle, and it'll search on that. So I can find myself if I type in Kenny. I can also find myself if I type in Jacobson or Kenny Jacobson. It goes ahead and looks for that handle. But what it doesn't do is go into the content of posts and bring back posts that contain that particular keyword. But that's only on this Lenster front end. If we go to the back end, we can get hashtags. There's not full text search right now, it's coming, but we can pull out hashtags. So let's go over how we would do that. So we'll go ahead and clear this out, and we'll look in our list again. We find search, and here query, we'll go ahead and we'll start out looking for names. So we'll do Kenny, and you choose here whether you're looking through publications or profiles. So in this case, we'll do profile. And when the results come back, you have to choose whether you're going to process it as a publication or as profiles. So we know we're searching for profiles, so we'll go ahead and enable this profile search result. We'll do items, ID, handle, and name. How does that sound? There we go. We get a whole bunch of Kennys. And like I said, we can also search on Jacobson, and it'll find me. You can't do Jacobson and expect to get anything. So within that name, I think it's looking for a space separator, but it seems to work with the initial part of a first or a last name. Let's try any without the K, see what happens. Yeah, same thing. But still, that's helpful. Okay, now let's do something here in the back end that you can't yet do on the front end, the Lenster front end. So let's change this up. Instead of profile, let's do publication. Let's uncheck profile and check publication search results. We'll do items and we'll do post. And we know by now that the content is there in metadata. Now, if I search on Kenny, it doesn't come back with anything because what it's looking for is if anyone's done hashtag Kenny. But let's look for one I know exists, which is music, because I've done a few hashtag musics. So if I hit that, now we can see that it comes back with a publication, post in this case, where music is hashtag right there. And you can see we have an empty object there and there. So what's our guess? Our guess is that those are probably not posts, but comments. So let's go ahead and check comment and also do metadata content. There we go. So I have two comments that have a hashtag music and one post. And just for the fun of it, let's see how many people put Wagami. Yep, plenty of people, right? So that's how you use search so far. Like I said, if you look in the documentation, they say that at some point they're going to enable a full text search, but we just don't have it right now. But one of your takeaways from this is let's go ahead and put hashtags in our content so we can make it searchable. So just as a review, with search, when we are searching on profile, we're looking at handle and name. And when we are searching in publications, we are looking for hashtags. Okay, we're getting to the end of this lesson and we still haven't found communities. Let's double check and make sure we didn't miss it. Let's go ahead and let's look through here. Approve, change, claimable handles. I don't see anything with community. All right, so what gives? Where are communities? Well, we know publications, right? Post, comment, mirrors. There's an attribute that we haven't looked at yet. It's app ID. So let's take a look at that real quick. So let's go ahead and use this. We'll do app ID, and on comment, we'll go ahead and do an app ID, and we hit run. So app ID Lenster, app ID Lenster. So we see Lenster a lot, but there are other values. And one of those values is Lenster community. So this is what happens, is your community ends up being just a post. It's a publication, but instead of the app ID being set to Lenster, it's set to Lenster community. And that way Lenster, the front end, can look at those two and decide whether your post is just a regular post or whether it's the start of a community. And any post within that community is really just a comment on that initial post which creates your community. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about so it makes a little bit more sense. Let's first go back to Explore Publications and we'll do Top Commented and we'll do Comment and we'll do Post, Metadata, Content, App ID. We'll hit Run. And now we see that this first one is actually a Lenster community. And we have another one and another one. And then we have a regular Lenster, and then a community. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could filter on App ID? Well, GraphQL is really powerful, and it might seem, like I said, similar to SQL, but there are some drawbacks. You can't just do a where clause on any field. You are only able to follow kind of the rules that the API developers have built into it. So luckily there is a way we can filter on API equal to Lenster community, but it's not as straightforward as you might think. What we need to do is go here to sources, and then in sources we put Lenster community. Now when I hit run, everything that shows up here is a Lenster community. Now let's say you wanted to build an app that lists all of the Lenster communities, because that actually doesn't exist right now in Lenster. If you click on communities, you get most active and fastest growing, but there's just 7 on each one of those. You want to maybe make an app that has a list of all of these communities. So how would you do that? Well, the problem right now is we're just getting a few of these communities back. I think we're getting about 25 back. So how do we get the next page? How do we paginate within this GraphQL API? Well, you might have seen this down here, page info, and a lot of these different objects that we've been working with had this, but we didn't go into it yet. But this is what we do. We do page info, and we'll go ahead and click all 3 and take a look at what's going on here. We scroll down to the very bottom, and we see we have a total count of 317. I'm assuming that means there's 317 of these communities that have been created. And we have a next and a previous. How do we use this? All right. What you'll want to do is highlight from the beginning double quote to this end one and copy it. I'm going to do a Control C. Then we go up here in our request, and I'm just going to type this one by hand so you can see. We want cursor, and we'll do colon, and then we just paste it just as is. Now when I hit run, it will give me the next 25. And you can see down here, if I want the next page, then I'll start at 50. So I can go up here, just modify this, and hit run. And now I have number 50 through 74. And so you just cycle through this until you got all 319, and then you might want to cache that. You might not want to have to run through it every time your special web page loads, right? But that's how you would do that. That's how you paginate through this GraphQL API. Anyway, I hope this has been fun and informative. Let me know if you liked it. Let me know what else you'd like to see me dive into, and let's get building.